The Impossible Starve. Two brothers journey to defy Prader-Willi Syndrome. A true story of courage, love, and the power of the human spirit. Sean Starr. Copyright 2025 by Sean Starr, all rights reserved. You are welcome and encouraged to freely share short excerpts, quotes, or selected chapters of this book for educational, inspirational, or promotional purposes without requesting permission, provided the material is not sold or presented as the complete work. Attribution to the author is appreciated. The full book in its entirety may not be reproduced, uploaded, or distributed without prior written consent. Use of any portion of the book to help spread awareness of the story, the lessons, or the message is encouraged. This is a work of non-fiction. Names have been changed to protect privacy. The events and conversations in this book have been recounted to the best of the author's recollection. For John, for the boy who was always hungry, yet still found room to laugh, for the man the world underestimated, but who fasted longer than logic allowed, for the soul who taught me patience and love without ego, and what it means to fight for something with everything you have. This book exists because you lived, because you tried, because you loved. You were my brother, and you were my miracle. I'm sorry for misunderstanding your anger and tantrums. I know it stemmed from your hunger. I know it stemmed from your body you couldn't control. I know it stemmed from how hard everything was for you. I should have been more aware while you were alive, yet I couldn't handle it at times and acted like a fool. Maybe I was just frustrated at this whole situation that we had to deal with. I often wonder why we had to go through so much. You pushed yourself so hard. I am so proud of what you accomplished. Your life wasn't meaningless. You are going to change the world. You will inspire so many around the world. I'm sure of it. I love you so much. I miss you so much. I want to see your smiles again. But at the same time, I'm so glad you're not in pain anymore. See you soon, John. Important medical disclaimer. This book describes the personal journey of the author and his brother John. It is not intended as medical advice, nor should it be used as a substitute for professional medical care. The protocols, treatments, and approaches described in this book were implemented under specific circumstances and with medical monitoring. Extreme dietary interventions, extended fasting, which can be dangerous, high-dose supplements, off-label medication use, alternative therapies. Do not attempt to replicate these protocols without consulting qualified healthcare professionals. Every person's medical situation is unique. What worked or didn't work for John may not apply to others. Prader-Willi Syndrome, cancer, and metabolic therapies all require individualized medical supervision. If you or a loved one is facing similar challenges, please work with licensed physicians, oncologists, and other appropriate specialists. The author and publisher disclaim any liability for adverse effects resulting from the use or application of the information contained in this book. Prologue. What hunger feels like. When it never ends. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you just finished Thanksgiving dinner. You're so full you can barely move. Your stomach is stretched, uncomfortable even. You couldn't eat another bite if someone paid you. Now imagine that 5 minutes later, while you can still taste the food in your mouth, your brain starts screaming. Not whispering, screaming. You're starving. You haven't eaten in days. Find food now. You know it's not true. You remember eating. You can feel the fullness. But your brain doesn't care about logic. It only knows hungry, 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 every single second. For your entire life. That's Prader-Willi Syndrome. And that was my brother John's reality from the moment he was born. This book is John's story. It's not a fairy tale where everything works out perfectly in the end. John passed away on November 6, 2025. But before he left us, he did something that medical science says is impossible. He fasted. Not once, multiple times. 7 days, 21 days, 26 days. People with Prader-Willi syndrome can't fast. That's not opinion. That's established medical fact. Their broken hypothalamus makes voluntary food restriction physiologically impossible. The medical literature is crystal clear. PWS patients require 24/7 food security, locked kitchens, constant supervision specifically because they cannot control their eating. Asking someone with PWS to fast is like asking someone without legs to run a marathon. It just doesn't happen. Except John did it. He fasted while fighting gastric cancer. He followed ketogenic protocols that would challenge a healthy person. He showed willpower that no PWS specialist would believe possible. He reversed his type 2 diabetes, from dangerously high blood sugar to completely normal, and he survived 3 years when doctors predicted 1. This is not medical advice. This is not a prescription or guarantee that anything will work for you. This is simply John's story. A story about 2 brothers who refused to give up on each other. About love that was real enough to withstand arguments, exhaustion, and impossible circumstances. About achievements that medical science says couldn't happen, but did. Why am I sharing this? Because if a man with Prader-Willi syndrome, whose brain literally cannot stop screaming about hunger, can complete multiple prolonged fasts, then there are no limitations to what you can do. John proved that impossible is just a word. Please use him as an inspiration for whatever circumstance you are facing. Let John's fight light your spark. He'd be so happy to know his struggles weren't for nothing. He loved helping people, anyone from the disabled, impoverished to the elderly. He was a pure, kind, and an innocent soul. Welcome to the story of the boy who couldn't stop being hungry, and the man who proved that willpower, properly supported, can override genetics. Hi, I am Sean, John's older brother. We were born in Korea and moved to an English-speaking country at an early age, which allowed us to be both fluent in English and Korean. We lived apart as we aged, where John lived in Korea and myself overseas, until we were brought together. We will be using aliases to avoid troubles from the contents of this story. The story is factually true to the best of my recollection. He did many different types of treatments, so I had a journal to briefly note what he was doing in case there was a need to trace down his side effects. With the rise of AI, I thought it was important to get John's story out as soon as possible because it would be difficult to distinguish true stories from a fabrication in the near future. The order of events has been modified for the flow of the story. Chapter 1. Born Hungry, PWS Explained. Before we go any further, you need to understand what Prader-Willi syndrome really is. Not the clinical definition, not the medical jargon. What it actually means to live with it. Because without understanding PWS, you can't truly appreciate what John accomplished. Imagine this. You wake up in the morning. Before you even open your eyes, your brain is screaming at you. You're starving. Find food. Eat. Now. Not a gentle hunger pang. Not, I should eat breakfast soon. Full panic mode. Survival mode. Your brain thinks you're starving. You eat a big breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon, fruit. You're physically full. But moments later, the signal returns. Louder, more urgent, more desperate. Still starving, need more food, find it. Lunch, same thing. Dinner, no relief. Midnight, 3 a.m., 5 a.m. The hunger never stops. Never. Not for 1 second. Not for 1 minute. Not for your entire life. That's Prader-Willi syndrome. And that was John's reality from the moment he was born. PWS is a genetic disorder caused by an abnormality on chromosome 15, 1 in 10,000 to 30,000 births. Rare enough that most people have never heard of it. Common enough that it's not medical mystery rare. It affects males and females equally. All races. All countries. But here's what makes it particularly cruel. The condition affects the hypothalamus, a small region deep in your brain that controls some of the most fundamental aspects of being human. The hypothalamus is like your body's control center. It regulates hunger and satiety, when to eat, when to stop, hormone production, growth, metabolism, development, emotional regulation, how you process and respond to feelings. For most people, These systems work automatically. You don't think about them. They just work. For someone with PWS, all of these systems are impaired. The science is still debating on the consensus, but outcome is still the same. John experienced unending hunger his entire life, the insatiable hunger. Your hypothalamus has receptors that detect leptin, the hormone that tells your brain, "You're full, stop eating." In PWS, these receptors don't work properly. The message of fullness never reaches the brain. Or if it does, the brain doesn't believe it. So the hypothalamus keeps sending distress signals. Starving, need food, emergency. It's not psychological hunger. It's not, "I'm bored, I want to snack." It's your brain genuinely believing you're on the edge of starvation. Every second. Forever. Think about that survival show you watched where people went without food for days. Remember how obsessed they became with eating? How it consumed their every thought? That's PWS. Except they feel that way all the time. Then there's the metabolism. The hypothalamus also controls growth hormone production. In PWS, this is severely reduced. What does that mean in practice? Poor muscle tone from birth. Babies with PWS are floppy, weak. Simple movements are exhausting. Shorter stature if not treated with growth hormone replacement. Lower metabolism. Their bodies burn calories much more slowly than normal. Different body composition. More fat, less muscle, even with the same diet. So you have someone who feels constantly starving, burns calories very slowly, has weak muscles that make exercise harder. It's like the universe designed the perfect trap. They are prone to gaining weight because of their lower metabolism. What a cruel joke. The emotional regulation is where things get even harder. Remember, the hypothalamus helps control your stress response, your fight or flight system. In PWS, this system is hyperactive. Small frustrations become overwhelming crises. Minor changes feel catastrophic. Stress that you or I would brush off hits them like a freight train. It's not that they're difficult or dramatic. Their nervous system literally processes stress differently. Imagine if a paper cut felt like a stab wound. If someone canceling plans felt like a death in the family. If running late triggered the same panic as being chased by a bear. That's the PWS stress response. And they can't just calm down any more than you can will yourself to stop feeling pain. Then there's impulse control. The gap between "I want that" and "I'm taking that" is razor thin. Not because they're bad people, not because they weren't taught right from wrong, because the neurological brakes don't work. You see a cookie. Your brain says, "That looks good." But then other parts of your brain weigh in. "But I just ate. But it's not mine. But I'll spoil my dinner." For someone with PWS, those other voices are much quieter. The impulse wins almost every time. This is what PWS patients are known for. Food-seeking behavior, breaking into locked pantries, stealing food, eating from trash. Stealing, mostly food and money. Lying, not malicious, just trying to avoid consequences they don't fully grasp. It's not a moral failing. It's neurological. Here's what you need to understand. When John had a meltdown, it wasn't a tantrum. It was a neurological storm he couldn't control. When John snuck food, it wasn't defiance. It was his brain in genuine survival panic. When John seemed to not understand consequences, it wasn't stupidity. It was impaired executive function. None of this was his fault. He was born with a broken control center in his brain, and he had to navigate a world designed for people whose control centers work perfectly. Now imagine living your entire life like this. Wake up starving. Eat breakfast, still hungry. Every emotion hits like a tidal wave. Small setbacks feel like disasters. Your body betrays you constantly. Weak muscles, low metabolism to burn fat. You can't trust your own impulses. Every desire feels urgent and impossible to resist. People judge you. They see the behavior but not the broken biology underneath. This is why what John did was impossible. Fasting requires ignoring hunger signals. His never stopped. Emotional regulation during stress. His was impaired. Impulse control. His was severely limited. Every single neurological system required for successful fasting was broken in John. Medical professionals will tell you PWS patients cannot fast. They'll say it's dangerous, cruel, impossible. They'll cite case studies of PWS patients breaking into locked pantries, literally eating to death, becoming violent when food restricted, and they're not wrong. That's the typical PWS experience. But John wasn't typical. Not because his PWS was milder, his was just as severe. Not because he had special advantages. He didn't. But because he had something most PWS patients never get: complete stability, unwavering structure, someone that he could fully trust, someone who would fight alongside him against his own biology. Not easy, never easy, but possible. So when you hear John fasted for 7 days with Prader-Willi Syndrome, don't think that's impressive. Think that's medically impossible, because it is. And John did it anyway. Now you understand what we were up against. Not just cancer, not just dietary changes. We were fighting John's own genetics. Chapter 2. Winter Runaway. Most of 2019, John was happy. He lived at a disability school, a place with dorms, teachers who understood him, friends who accepted him. When holidays came, he'd temporarily go back to his old caretaker's home until school reopened. That's where everything went wrong. December 2019, Seoul, South Korea. John went missing. Not for the first time. Not even the second time. The third time. And this time, he ran away in slippers. In December. In one of the coldest Korean winters in years. Let me paint you a picture of what running away means for someone with Prader-Willi Syndrome. It doesn't mean grabbing a backpack, packing snacks, planning a destination. It means feeling so trapped, so overwhelmed, so desperate that the freezing unknown seemed better than staying one more second. It means walking out the door with nothing. No warm clothes, no money, no plan, just slippers and desperation. For over a week, John lived in Seoul's subway system. Not stayed, lived. He slept sitting on the subway toilets. He ate from garbage bins, scraps other people threw away. He wandered alone, no one to rely on. December in Korea isn't just cold. It's bone-breaking and fingers go numb in minutes, and John was out there in slippers. Now here's what makes this even more heartbreaking. John had Prader-Willi Syndrome. His brain screamed at him 24/7 that he was starving. And here he was, actually starving, looking for throwaway scraps. His worst nightmare became his reality, and he chose it anyway, because whatever he was running from felt worse. My father gave me a message 2 days after he went missing. John ran away from his caregivers 2 days ago, and they couldn't find him, so they reported John to the police. The police were searching. CCTV footage showed John walking towards Gimpo, Seoul, but they weren't able to pinpoint his location. I went to Korea straight away and started to search myself. I looked everywhere. Public bathhouses, 24-hour PC cafes, McDonald's that never close, toilets at the park, Gimpo airport terminal, anywhere someone could hide from the cold. I walked through freezing December nights looking for my brother. Every warm place, every shelter that wouldn't kick him out. Then a report came of someone eating from the rubbish bins in the subway. The police finally found him. He'd been gone over 10 days. During the freezing winter, but he survived. When my father collected him from the police station, John looked physically okay. Hungry, cold, exhausted, smelly, but alive. My father took him to a public bathhouse so he can wash up, then took him back to his school. The current caregivers were no longer an option for John to stay. This third runaway was the last straw. And that's when I made a decision that would change both our lives. That's it, I told my father. John lives with me now. Not temporarily, not until we figure something else out. Not for a few months, just with me. Period. I'm bringing him home, and he's never going to go missing again. My father didn't argue. He knew. We both knew. John's caregivers admitted to my father that looking after John was too difficult. John needed someone who wouldn't give up. I only had temporary experience of looking after John. only a few months at most, but the decision was clear. He needed to stay at a place where he would feel safe and happy. He needed to be with someone that loved him dearly and understood his situation. He needed someone to look after him when the difficulties of PWS set in. He needed someone to be strict enough to lock up the fridge because his diabetes was out of control, and I was going to be that person. I wasn't trained for this, I'm just his older brother. But I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. John couldn't keep living like this, bouncing between places, go missing and potentially lose his life. He needed stability more than he needed perfection. I loved him. And love meant showing up, every day, no matter how hard it got. So I rented a small apartment and brought John home, to my place, where safety was guaranteed. And I told him, "Bro, you're never going to run away ever again. You'll have lots of fun while you're with me, okay?" I didn't know if I could keep that promise. I just said what rang true in my heart. This was the beginning, not of a perfect story, not of an easy journey, but of something real. The beginning of full-time caregiving, the beginning of learning what John actually needed, the beginning of building a life where he felt safe enough to stay. And here's what I didn't know then. In 3 years, this same brother, a boy that had no control over his hunger due to a genetic disorder caused by the loss of function on chromosome 15, would accomplish something medical science says is impossible. He would fast, voluntarily, for days at a time. The man whose brain screamed starving every second of his life would choose not to eat, not once, multiple times, 7 days, 21 days, 26 days. Impossible. That's what everyone thought. And John proved them all wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we had to build a foundation. We had to create a world where John felt safe, where routine replaced chaos, where structure replaced uncertainty, where someone finally understood him. That December 2019, when I brought John home, I had no idea what was coming. No idea that in 3 years we'd be fighting cancer. No idea that John would become the first person with PWS to complete extended fasts. As far as I know, there is no record of someone with PWS accomplishing prolonged fasts. This is where John's impossible journey truly began. Not with the cancer diagnosis, not with the fasting, but with a simple decision. You're coming home, and this time you'll be happy. Chapter 3. 3 years of battle. When John got settled at my place, I asked the question, "So, why did you run away?" He never answered when our father asked. But John and I were always close. He trusted me. So he opened up. "I don't like it there. There's nothing to do. It feels like a prison." "Is that the only reason? Did anything else happen?" He kicked me down the stairs. I got hurt. My blood went cold. What? Why? Because he saw me eating from rubbish bins during my walk back to his house. My blood started to boil. They were paid to look after John. We trusted them for years. They'd been compensated to care for him. And instead of understanding that PWS makes you eat anything, rotten food, garbage, whatever your brain thinks will stop the starvation signal, they punished him, violently. I wanted to confront them, wanted to express my anger. But I let it pass. Because honestly, if I'd seen John eating rotten food, I would have been angry too. The difference, I would never have kicked him. From that moment on, John was home. Not temporarily, not until we found something better. Home, the daily routine that wasn't really a routine. People imagine caregiving as a schedule. Morning, daytime, evening, bedtime. That wasn't reality. Living with PWS meant living with unpredictable mood swings, uncontrollable hunger, sudden stress reactions, emotional meltdowns that came out of nowhere. A delicate balance that could tip any second. Every day was a negotiation. Every morning began the same way. Checking the CCTV. Not to spy on John. Not to catch him doing something wrong. To see if the fridge locks had survived the night. Some mornings they did. Some mornings they didn't. But knowing was essential. Because if John had broken the locks and binged during the night, his blood sugar the next day would be dangerous. His mood would be unstable. Everything would be harder. So the first ritual of every day became, check the cameras, check the locks, check John, start again. This wasn't an ordinary home. It was built for his survival. The fridge was locked. Food was locked inside my room. Meals had to be planned, controlled, carefully monitored. The entire space was structured around John's safety, not convenience. No sugary snacks, no easily accessible foods, no temptations, strict blood sugar monitoring, daily exercise routines. It wasn't perfect. Some days were quiet. Some days exploded out of nowhere. Some days ended in yelling and screaming. But what mattered? Every day started again. And John never ran away. Exercise wasn't optional. It was medicine. When John first came to my apartment, his diabetes was dangerously high, around 300 milligrams per deciliter. I saw strange black spots around his ankle. His skin underneath his feet was ripped apart from constant picking, a PWS trait he couldn't control. Swollen, yellow, infected looking. His body was breaking down. I knew the first thing I had to do, lower his diabetes. I researched, did the usual exercise plus meal plan, lots of vegetables, some protein, lots of movement, but John didn't like exercise. Not really. He did like games though. So I bought a Nintendo Switch and used Ring Fit Adventure, Just Dance. Anything that made movement fun. While he exercised, he would be drenched in sweat and saw notable improvements with his weight and diabetes. The difference was visible. Dramatic. When John stayed with me, his diabetes numbers dropped into normal ranges, 80 to 120 milligrams per deciliter. His weight reduced from 85 kilograms, 187 pounds, to 62 kilograms, 136 pounds. His mood improved. He looked healthier, though he had flabby skin. He had more energy. When he went back to school, where food structure was looser, supervision less constant, his diabetes would shoot back up. 200 milligrams per deciliter, 250, sometimes 300. His body couldn't hide the truth. John's diabetes specialist at S Hospital noticed immediately. He asked me bluntly, "Is it not possible for you to look after him full-time? His numbers keep spiking too high when he's not with you. He won't have long to live with these levels." Full-time caregiving was a mountain. Physically, emotionally, financially. I was doing my best, but I couldn't do it 24/7, 365. Not yet. So John went back and forth. Months at school, then months with me. Back and forth. A rhythm that was messy but necessary. The arguments and the apologies. Love between brothers isn't gentle. There were moments when he didn't listen. Moments when hunger made him irritable. Moments when stress turned small requests into big fights. Moments when I yelled. Moments when he yelled. Moments when we both said things in frustration. But every argument ended the same way. With understanding. With a quieter moment afterward. With John following my lead. Not because he had to, but because he trusted me. With me forgiving him. Not because I was perfect, but because I couldn't imagine abandoning him. This was not the polished love of movies. It was the messy love of real life. Two people trying to survive together. Two hearts connected by loyalty and necessity. People ask sometimes, where were his parents? Here's the truth. John's tantrums made 24/7 care almost impossible for them. He would break locks with pliers or hammers. Sometimes he would yell and scream if locks were placed by them and demand them to be removed. His tantrums were violent at times. It may sound odd, but this is standard practice for families with PWS. Because if you don't lock the food, they'll eat themselves to death. Literally. Their brain won't stop them. Their stomach won't stop them. They'll eat until their stomach ruptures. My parents loved John. They adored him and had compassion for him, but they couldn't handle the constant battle. I don't blame them. It takes everything you have. Every ounce of patience. Every bit of energy. And even then, some days you fail. They were only able to support financially. Being the older brother meant I could handle him when things got difficult. Not just physically, but emotionally. I knew his patterns. I knew when storms were coming, and I did my best to steer him away from the edge whenever I could. But it cost me too. My freedom, my time, my money, my health. PWS Foundation states PWS requires 24/7 supervision, eyes on them at all times. It requires the entire family and outside support to make it happen, but I didn't have that kind of luxury. There is no support for PWS in Korea, not like in the US or UK. I had to keep an eye on him as much as I could. I couldn't eat freely, which led to malnutrition. I had to handle all his tantrums on my own, but still, I felt happy that I could be there with him when he needed me. And life stabilized. Slowly. John felt more secure. His routines became manageable. His diabetes dropped to normal levels under my care. Our relationship was deeper than it had ever been. For the first time in years, the path ahead looked survivable. And then, in December 2022, came the news that would change everything. Cancer. In the worst possible location. In the worst possible body for treatment. In a man who had already fought so much. The next chapter of John's life would be the hardest yet. But those 3 years in my home, the routines, the CCTV checks, the exercise games, the arguments, the forgiveness, the laughter, had prepared both of us for a fight no one saw coming. A fight that would show the world just how incredible John truly was. Chapter 4. The Diagnosis. The diagnosis that stopped our world. It was the 23rd of December 2022. I still remember the day the phone rang. My father's voice was tight, confused but serious. He said the doctors at S Hospital found anemia in John's blood work, severe enough that they immediately performed an endoscopy on the 16th of December, and the results came in. They are saying he's got gastric cancer. You need to go to the hospital with John tomorrow. For a moment, everything around me went silent. Then I replied, "Huh? What do you mean cancer? This makes no sense. I'm sure they are mistaken." John had no pain, no visible symptoms. He'd been eating fine, living normally. Gastric cancer doesn't warn you, and in a strange way, if there is any luck in this type of cancer, is that there is no sense of pain with gastric cancer. But hearing the word cancer, that was enough to collapse the floor beneath me. The meeting 24th of December 2022, an oncologist specializing in gastric cancer, a calm, experienced woman, showed us the results. Early stage, she said, caught in time, a chance. But the treatment plan was clear. The standard recommendation is full gastrectomy, removal of the entire stomach. That sentence hit me harder than the cancer itself. A stomach is not like a gallbladder or appendix. You don't remove it and continue life normally. John didn't react. He sat quietly, absorbing the shock. I could tell he was scared. I was sitting next to him, trying to process 1,000 thoughts at once. I had gone through 3 years of looking after him, dealing with all the hunger problems, and now he's supposed to get his entire stomach removed? The doctor explained that patients eventually regain 80 to 90% of their eating function after about a year. But I already had doubts to believe this would be that simple. I've known John for a long time. I know he can't control what he puts in his mouth. If he feels hungry, then he will shove it down his throat. He will even go through rubbish to do so. I heard many stories of PWS patients dying from overeating. I felt like I had to do more research myself. Later, when we were referred to a chemotherapy specialist, she told me, "Chemotherapy is not very effective for this type of gastric cancer. Stomach removal is the best treatment." I explained my brother's condition. John's nonstop hunger, his history of food seeking, his fast-eating habits, his uncontrollable tantrums when hungry, the risk of overeating even with a stomach, the documented cases of PWS patients dying from stomach rupture due to binging. Both doctors listened, but they could only recommend what the medical guidelines said. I wasn't against chemo. I wasn't against the treatment. I was terrified of the gastrectomy, not because of the procedure, but because I knew from decades of lived experience with John, that the post-operative lifestyle would destroy him emotionally and possibly physically. I asked, how long would he live if he didn't have the surgery? It's hard to be accurate, but on average, with this type of cancer, I'd say around 1 year. My heart sank. The drive home. On the drive back, the shock finally began to hit him. He didn't cry out loud, but I could see fear creeping into his eyes. He just looked very dull. I told him, "Don't worry, John, you'll be okay." And for some reason, I felt it would be okay. When I got home, I did what any desperate person does. I researched. Not just the cancer, not just the surgery, the aftermath, what life would actually look like for John after a total gastrectomy. When I looked deeper into long-term research and actual patient stories, I kept seeing the same pattern. Small, frequent meals, 6 to 8 tiny portions a day, chewing slowly, every bite, every time, avoiding certain foods entirely, dumping syndrome, where food rushes too fast into the small intestine, causing nausea, cramping, diarrhea, dizziness, and major discomfort, weight loss, nutrient deficiencies, vitamin injections for life. For a typical patient, challenging but survivable. For someone with PWS, someone who lives with relentless, screaming hunger every second of every day, someone whose impulse control is fundamentally broken, someone who's eaten from garbage bins because his brain was convinced he was starving. That level of discipline wasn't just difficult. It felt like hell, even with 24/7 supervision. And even then, even if we somehow maintained perfect supervision, perfect discipline, perfect control, controlling what and how John eats for the rest of his life, it didn't seem realistic, because the consequences of failure weren't just uncomfortable. One binge episode, just one moment where John's broken hypothalamus overpowered his willpower, and the results would be catastrophic. Dumping syndrome at best, intestinal rupture at worst, excruciatingly painful way to die, and it could happen at any time, knowing John and his hunger tendencies. It honestly felt like a ticking time bomb. Not if it would happen. When. But ultimately, this wasn't my decision to make. It was John's, and for him to make the right decision, he deserved the truth. Not a sugar-coated version, not false hope, not manipulation. The truth. I paused before telling him everything I'd found. Wondered if it was the right thing to do. Wondered if I was being cruel by laying it all out. My heart said, tell him. I wasn't trying to scare or persuade him. I was giving him the respect he deserved, the truth before making a life-changing decision. I explained. Surgery. Remove your stomach. Eat tiny amounts 6 times a day. Chew slowly every time. Avoid certain foods that cause problems. Risk dumping syndrome with every meal, nutrient deficiencies, vitamin injections. Some people might think John wasn't capable of making a decision like this, but honestly, he was more than capable. His entire life revolved around food, every waking moment, every thought, every struggle. To heavily restrict him for the rest of his life without giving him the option to choose? No. I knew John. I knew his triggers. I knew the history of tantrums around food. I knew how hard it was for him to control hunger even with a stomach. But personal thoughts aside, John had to choose. He looked at me with clear eyes, frustrated, angry, sad, upset, but certain. I would rather die than have that surgery. His voice was firm. What's the point in living if I can't eat what I want? What do you mean I have to eat tiny meals the whole day? There's no point in living. He wasn't being dramatic. He wasn't throwing a tantrum. He was telling me his truth. I'd require an entire team to look after him for the rest of his life to make this work, and even then it would be challenging to face his wild tantrums. His decision was made. All right, then there might be another method we can try. Do you want to see? What's that? While I was searching, by grace of God, I found a very credible alternative method, the metabolic approach to cancer. The first video was of an interview of Dr. Berg with an elderly French man called Guy, stage 4 cancer, given months to live, He fasted. Long, extended fasts, combined with ketogenic diet and specific supplements to block cancer's metabolic pathways. The tumors shrank, then disappeared. Years later, he was still alive, thriving. Second was Fred, also with Dr. Berg. Fred, stage 3 cancer, similar story. Metabolic therapy, fasting, chemo, supplements. Cancer gone. I watched their testimonials, read their protocols, absorbed every detail. Then I went down the rabbit hole of metabolic therapy, ketogenic diet, and prolonged fasting. Dr. Thomas Seyfried in his protocol was very promising. Basically, he was saying that cancer is not a genetic disease but a metabolic one. Cancer cells rely on glucose and glutamine, and they're inefficient at using ketones, the energy molecule the body produces when you're fasting or on a ketogenic diet. Then I found Dr. Jason Fung, an expert on fasting and its therapeutic benefits. I found titans of their field all on day 1. I felt like I was being guided by God. I shared the first 2 Dr. Berg's interviews with John. Hey bro, there are people that shrunk their cancer. Do you want to see? Okay. John watched quietly. I explained the difficult parts that he couldn't understand. After the videos finished, I asked him, should we try fasting then? Yeah, okay, it's better than surgery. He sounded hopeful. But here's the problem, the massive problem. The protocols these survivors used involved extended prolonged fasting. 5 days, 7 days, 21 days, sometimes longer. These were normal people with normal brains, normal satiety signals, normal hunger cues. John had Prader-Willi Syndrome. Medical literature said it was impossible. PWS patients can't fast. They can't control food intake. They need 24/7 supervision specifically because they cannot regulate their own eating. And I was proposing we have John, whose brain screamed, starving, even after a full meal. Go 7 days without food. Every expert would say I was insane. Every caregiver would say it was cruel. Every doctor would say it was dangerous. And they'd all be right. Except for one thing. John wanted to live. Not just survive. Actually live. With quality. With dignity. Without having his stomach removed and his quality of life destroyed. He was willing to do the impossible. And I was willing to help him try. I started to plan our next move to make this happen. Chapter 5. 7 days without food. I didn't sleep that night. Well, for many months to follow because there was so much to research. But for now, my mind raced through the plan. Supplements to support the fast, distractions to keep John's mind off food, rewards to motivate him through the hard moments. A complete clearing of our home, every carb, every temptation gone. This wasn't just about cancer treatment. This was about proving that John could do something that medical science said was impossible. I knew there was just too much food at home, so I thought going to a nearby hotel would be the best way to make sure he couldn't eat during his fast. Day 1. The hotel. Why a hotel? Because success required complete control. Our house had too much food, too many temptations for someone whose brain constantly screamed hungry. If I couldn't secure the environment, I couldn't help John succeed. I booked a nearby hotel, walking distance from home. It had 2 gaming PCs, a large TV, access to games and movies. Anything to keep John distracted. Anything to help him forget about food. The original plan, 5 days. A complete water fast with supplements. Break the fast with bone broth. This was our initial plan as it was the first time we actually did a fast. I learnt that autophagy, the process of recycling damaged cells, requires around 48 hours to kick in, so I thought 5 days would be a good start, as 3 days would only give us 1 day of autophagy. I explained the protocol to John. I promised him rewards. Every extra day he lasted, I'd buy him a new movie to watch. I told him, "Don't worry, bro, this will be easy. I'll fast with you." On 24th evening, we had our last meal. Then the fast began. The impossible begins. The first fast. December 25th. Hotel quarantine. I went in and immediately took out all the sweets and drinks from the room. John was already annoyed, typical PWS behavior, but I distracted him. "Wow, look at the TV. It's so huge. Go and check what channels they got." The first days were the hardest. His hunger wasn't ordinary hunger. PWS, hunger is constant, endless, a signal that never turns off. For most people, hunger rises, then falls. For John, it only ever rose. And yet, he held. He drank lots of tea, water, warm liquids to soothe the stomach. Sometimes he groaned softly. Sometimes he looked like he was wrestling himself internally, but he didn't break. He gamed for distraction. He lay in bed to conserve energy. He watched lots of TV and movies. I paid for more premium movies as his reward for surviving another night. Every hour seemed like a miracle. While he was watching movies and playing games, I was constantly looking up more information and buying books and supplements he required. And late at night, when John would go to sleep, I would wait 30 minutes and walk around to see if he would wake. When I was sure he was asleep, I would walk back to my home, which was around 5 minutes away in the freezing Korean winter, and started to clear everything that wasn't keto-friendly. I was surprised how much food I had to dispose because of the carbohydrate content, and there were piles of pills and keto-friendly foods I ordered, which I had to organize so our house would be ready for John's ketogenic diet. I found good quality oxtail soup, which is a good equivalent of a bone broth in the West. I bought many vegetables, konjac noodles, keto spices, keto bread, grass-fed meats, whatever had a low carbohydrate level. This took many hours every night, and some days I was too cold and too exhausted, so I had to drive the short distance. I was completely drained because I was fasting while having to sort out the entire house, foods and pills myself late at night. But I knew this had to be all complete before John's fast ended. I had no choice but to carry on. This carried on until the end of his fast. Day 3 to 4, something changes. By the third day, hunger transformed. He didn't seem too agitated, though I was careful around him. He wasn't panicking. His body must have crossed the metabolic threshold, switching from glucose to fat fuel. He seemed fine, maybe more still. He never said he was hungry, but I never dared to ask. He'd just do the usual of playing games and watching TV. Day 5. Most would have stopped there, 5 days without food, and doing it with Prader-Willi Syndrome on his back. A miracle. But he looked fine. So I asked him, "John, do you want to do 2 more days? I'll let you stay here longer and I'll continue to buy you movies." He looked at me calmly and said, "Okay, I can keep going." The world told him hunger would own him, and he proved everyone wrong. That was when I truly understood. If he wanted something, really wanted it, he could move mountains. Not because he was free of suffering, but because he had endured it his entire life. Fasting wasn't the miracle. His determination was. He didn't want to talk much during his fast, so his answers were short, and our conversations were minimal. Day 7, the first miracle. He actually did it. We started on the 25th of December, 2022 till morning of the 1st of January, 2023. He actually finished a water fast for 7 days with PWS. I broke the fast 12 hours before him so I can have the energy to prepare him for breaking his fast. I went to a nearby Korean restaurant that had some beef soup. I am hungry now. I want to eat. Sure, but before you eat, do you want some extra oxtail soup? I can give it to you 1 hour before your meal if you want it as an extra. Okay, I'll have it. I knew that he'd want to eat straight away, so I switched up my words to help him break his fast safely. I was incredibly proud of what he did. I didn't think it was physically possible for him to do a whole week of fasting, and on the first day of January 2023, the man completed it. I'd dare say he's the first person with PWS that completed a 7-day fast in the world. I don't have a video record, but what I do have are the blood test results that showed incredible progress. After the fast, we went back home, and I transitioned him to a ketogenic diet. And just after 15 days, on the 16th of January, 2023, we attempted second prolonged fast. Chapter 6. Results that looked like science fiction. Meeting with his diabetes specialist at S Hospital. Diabetes crash, ketones rise, confidence born. The results speak for themselves. We had a blood test on the 24th of December, 2022, on the day of the first meeting with the oncologist, and another one with his diabetes specialist on the 16th of January, 2023, 23 days apart. 16th of January was also the day we started the second prolonged fast. His fasting glucose went from 228 down to 144. Hemoglobin A1C from 10.9, from October 2022 to 7.5. His ketones were high. The nurse was shocked and asked if something happened because he lost around 6 kilograms, 13 pounds, since last time. She thought it had something to do with his cancer. No, we did this through effort and sheer will. We had to work really hard to achieve this. And I explained that we are currently on a ketogenic diet and did a 7-day fast. We put a pause on the operation for now. We wanted to see if this would work, even though both me and John were against the operation in the first place. It served as a backstop in case it didn't work for us. Oncologists weren't happy and said what we were doing was nonsense. I didn't take offense. I just wanted my brother to live. And by live, I mean live where he can be happy. Cutting out the entire stomach would be straight hell for him, and John was really against it as well. He didn't say much at the hospital in front of the doctors, but at home he was always against it, except one time when he didn't brush his teeth and I told him in anger, "Well, if you're not going to brush your teeth, then you may as well do the surgery. The cancer will keep growing if you don't brush your teeth properly. You fasted for nothing." "Fine, I'll do the surgery then." And he started to cry loudly, and for a while he was set on doing it, but then changed his mind few days later. Chapter 7. Protocols, Pills, War Mode. A critical warning. This is not medical advice. These protocols involved extreme supplement doses, can be dangerous, off-label medications, consult with a professional. Treatments not FDA approved for cancer. Potential drug interactions need for medical monitoring. We didn't do this alone. I researched obsessively, adjusted constantly based on blood work and symptoms. Many times John just straight refused to have pills after a certain period. We worked with oncologists, the few that was open enough. We measured everything: glucose, ketones, general blood tests such as liver function, as he was consuming so many pills. If you're fighting cancer, work with medical professionals who understand metabolic therapy. Don't copy what's in here blindly. Every situation is different, but if you're facing impossible, if conventional medicine says there's nothing they can do, if you're desperate and willing to try anything, know this: metabolic therapy is real. The science exists. The mechanisms are understood. It's not magic. It's not guaranteed, but it's a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all you need. For John, these protocols combined with his impossible fasts created something remarkable. 3 years of life. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of proving that impossible is just a word. The pills lined up every morning weren't just supplements. They were hope in capsule form. And we fought, every day, with every pill, with every fast, with every treatment. We fought like John's life depended on it. Because it did. After John's first 7-day fast, everything changed. We'd proven the impossible was possible. But one fast wasn't enough. Not against cancer. Now the fight became organized. Science plus desperation. Strategy plus hope. War mode. Pills lined the kitchen counter like ammunition. Bottles everywhere. Each one carefully researched. Each one targeting a different aspect of cancer's ability to survive. This wasn't just treatment. This was war strategy. And cancer wasn't the only enemy. Time was. The foundation. Ketogenic diet. Everything started here. Carbohydrates turn into glucose. We needed to stick to a low-carb diet. The science is straightforward. Cancer cells are metabolically inflexible. They rely heavily on glucose for fuel. When you remove glucose and force the body to run on ketones, fat-derived fuel. Normal cells adapt easily. Cancer cells struggle. John's ketogenic meals looked like this. Breakfast: an omelet cooked in butter. Would add some cauliflower rice, some vegetables. Used organic free-range eggs. Lunch: some meats with vegetables on the side. I tried to get grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon if possible. Leafy greens with olive oil as dressing. Dinner: similar to lunch. I would vary it up sometimes, making some stir-fried noodles with konjac, but he seemed to get constipation after eating it. But he enjoyed it so much that he would demand me to make more. I used lots of mushrooms when I could since I knew it had benefits for the immune system. I added some sprouts to his meals, such as broccoli sprouts for its sulforaphane content. Sausages and pork were great to quickly cook a meal with its high fat content. I'd give him coconut Greek yogurt as a snack, though it was mainly used to add some off-label pills. Organic, freshly squeezed carrot juice. Beef patties and minced meats were great for helping his anemia. I believe it is absorbed faster than normal meats, though John got sick of these after a while. And lots of butter from New Zealand. Ketosis wasn't a diet for us, it was survival. The goal: keep blood glucose low, 80 to 100 milligrams per deciliter, and ketones high, 1.0 to 3.0 plus millimoles per liter. We saw ketones drop off after initial phases, and it only spiked higher during fasts. It would have been much easier to reach higher ketones if we switched to a carnivore diet. But he didn't comply. He said he loved eating vegetables. There is a vegetable-only diet by Chris Wark from his book, Chris Beat Cancer, but John said he loved meats. I guess we could only do the middle path. The power of autophagy through fasting. Here's where fasting becomes more than just glucose control. Autophagy means self-eating. During extended fasts, your body starts recycling damaged cells, broken proteins, and malfunctioning cellular components. Think of it as your body's deep cleaning mode. It breaks down old, damaged cells, including potentially cancerous ones, and recycles the parts for energy. Dr. Yoshinori Osumi won the Nobel Prize in 2016 for discovering the mechanisms of autophagy. It's real science, not pseudoscience. Fasting triggers autophagy most powerfully after 16 to 24 hours, but extended fasts, 3+ days, push it into overdrive. This is why John's 7-day, 21-day, and 26-day fasts weren't just about starving cancer cells of glucose. They were triggering his body to clean house, to identify and destroy dysfunctional cells, to optimize survival at the cellular level. For someone fighting cancer, autophagy is a weapon, fasting plus chemotherapy. Dr. Walter Longo's work showed when you fast before, during, and after chemotherapy, normal cells enter protective mode. They slow down, conserve resources, become more resistant to chemo's toxic effects. Cancer cells can't do this. Their broken metabolism keeps them vulnerable. Result: chemo hits cancer harder while causing fewer side effects to healthy tissue. While I wanted to keep using this method, John was refusing to do more fasts. He only tried it once or twice. This was the trick Fred used when he was using chemo and saw 0 side effects from chemotherapy. SCOT inhibitors, blocking cancer's pathways. This is based on Dr. Berg's studies. It showed that blocking certain pathways can slow or starve out cancer cells. We tried this for roughly a year, but we had to keep adjusting, and at the end we had to reduce significant number of pills because it was getting difficult for him to swallow and digest so many pills. So we ended up just sticking with the core supplements necessary for John. The full list is on Guy's book titled My Battle Against Cancer. Jane's famous book, How to Starve Cancer, also goes through all the supplements she used to block certain pathways. One thing is common. Because we are so early, many cancer patients are taking enormous amounts of pills for survival. High-dose vitamin C IV, the oxidative weapon. At normal doses, 500 milligrams orally, vitamin C is an antioxidant. At megadoses, 25 to 50 grams IV, it becomes pro-oxidant. It generates hydrogen peroxide specifically in cancer cells, damaging them while leaving healthy cells alone. Why IV instead of oral? Oral vitamin C maxes out at certain blood levels. IV bypasses digestion, achieving concentrations much higher. We did high-dose vitamin C IVs 2 to 3 times a week when possible. 70 grams per session. Took about 2 hours. The science. Cancer cells are deficient in catalase, enzyme that breaks down hydrogen peroxide. Normal cells have plenty, so the peroxide accumulates in cancer cells, causing oxidative damage. The issue was John had very thin veins, so it was difficult to administer as time progressed. Metformin, the diabetes drug that fights cancer. Metformin is normally prescribed for type 2 diabetes, but research shows it has anti-cancer properties. Activates AMPK, energy sensor that inhibits cancer growth. Reduces insulin and IGF-1, cancer growth factors. Disrupts mitochondrial function in cancer cells. Makes cancer cells more vulnerable to treatment. John was already a diabetic and had these already. Metformin served dual purpose, control blood sugar, important for PWS. Attack cancer metabolism. Dose, 850 to 1,000 milligrams morning and night after meals. Hyperthermia treatments. Heat kills. Cancer. Cancer cells hate heat more than normal cells. At 42 to 43 degrees Celsius, 107 to 109 degrees Fahrenheit, cancer cells start dying. Normal cells tolerate it better. We used local hyperthermia when available, targeted heating of the tumor area, combined with other treatments for synergistic effect. The heat damages cancer cell membranes, disrupts proteins, makes cells more vulnerable to immune attack and other therapies. This is the most expensive treatment, costing $500 to $600 per session. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT, pressure plus oxygen plus ketones. This one's fascinating. Cancer cells thrive in low oxygen, hypoxic environments. They're adapted for it. HBOT floods tissues with oxygen under pressure. But here's the key. Combined with ketogenic diet and fasting, HBOT becomes even more powerful. This was shown from Dominic P. D'Agostino's studies. The mechanism: high ketones plus high oxygen equals oxidative stress in cancer cells. Normal cells handle it fine. They have strong mitochondria. Cancer cells? Their damaged mitochondria can't cope. The combination is toxic to them. John did HBOT sessions when we could access chambers, 60 to 90 minutes per session. He did pressure ranging from 1.0 ATA all the way to 2.0 plus ATA pressure, pure oxygen. Best results when done in deep ketosis from fasting. Example of pills. The pills were changed many times. This is just an example when John was temporarily doing intermittent fasting, 2 meals a day. There is a lot here, but he didn't do it 100% all the time. He did what he could, but he definitely had a lot of pills. It was something we were trying to emulate because it worked for Guy, Jane, and many others at shrinking their tumors. They successfully blocked pathways their cancer used for growth. This is to just illustrate how hard John and I were fighting to defeat this cancer. The core list. As John was not able to tolerate so many pills, I had to just stick with the most important pills. Vitamin D, vitamin K, milk thistle, fenbendazole/mebendazole, ivermectin, melatonin, on and off. Mushroom blend powder form. How did it work out? Here's what we saw. Even with all these pills, his liver functions were in normal ranges. His diabetes was healthy most of the time. His white blood cells were normal most of the time. His red blood cells were low due to anemia from the gastric cancer. His creatinine levels were low most of the time due to lack of exercise. He wouldn't comply. Other than that, we didn't see too much issues. But the tumor kept growing. We only saw tumor shrinkage when it was mixed with conventional treatments. We were only using the core list when we were doing radiation chemo. Did the protocols fail? No. I believe they bought time. They improved quality of life. Everything we did gave John extra years he wasn't supposed to have. But they weren't a cure for John's case. He had some major difficulties following basic rules, so I believe it played a major factor. These will be discussed in later chapters. Chapter 8, 21 days, then 26. January 16th, 2023. We'd done the impossible once, the 7-day fast, Christmas in a hotel room. John, a man with Prader-Willi Syndrome, choosing not to eat for a week. Every medical professional said it couldn't be done. John proved them wrong. But here's what nobody expected. He was just getting started. The 7-day fast had shown us something crucial. John's willpower could override his biology. Not easily, not comfortably, but it could be done. And if 7 days was possible, what about longer? 7 days is impressive, but cancer cells are adaptive, resilient. To really starve them, you need to go longer, much longer. Guy had done 45 days. Fred had done 21 days and watched his tumor shrink by 50%. These were normal men with normal hypothalamuses. John had PWS, but he'd also just proven that impossible was just a word. "Do you think you could do longer?" I asked him. "How much longer?" "How about 2 to 3 weeks?" 2 to 3 weeks is a whole lot different from 7 days. 7 days, you can see the end. You can count down. You know relief is coming. But this? That's pushing into territory where your body fundamentally changes, where ketosis becomes your new baseline, where hunger shifts from screaming to something else. So I used the art of the deal, a deal that he couldn't refuse. "I'll buy a PS5, and every week you finish a fast, I will buy you 2 expensive games." Wait, what? There is no PS5. He wasn't aware of PS5, only the PS4. "Yes, there is, and I'll get it if you fast." "Okay, I'll do it. Oh, hell yeah." This was negotiated few weeks before the start of the second prolonged fast. I immediately got the PS5 and let him play before the fast. He was so excited about the PS5 that I couldn't wait for the fast to let him play. I just wanted him to be happy. He went through so much recently. I kind of caved on the deal. I bought a few games, but not the ones he really wanted because I needed them for his rewards if he could go through it. The CCTVs was already set up while I was looking after him, so there was no chance he could cheat. I checked the CCTV every day. It has a sensor and auto-recorded any movements, and luckily, there was 0 case of him cheating the fast. I made sure there was hardly any food in the fridge even if he decided to break the locks. I had to make the environment free from food smells, so it wouldn't distract him from fasting. Unlike John, who had a lot of fat to burn into ketones, he was bordering obesity at 29.3 BMI at the start. I was at normal weight and didn't have much fat to burn. When we went to hospitals, they thought I was the patient because I was so skinny when John looked healthy. I couldn't eat properly during his fasting period, and I became underweight again at 15.8 BMI, losing around 20 kilograms, 44 pounds. I looked like a Korean Gandhi or something. I usually had 1 meal a day, or none, by sneaking the food into my room or sneaking out for a short time while watching the CCTV via the app. It got so bad that I tried to do 2 meals a day at times. My body would tremble, and I would go to sleep in tears because of hunger and exhaustion. Many, many times. It was a lot to take on all alone. But I had a thought. This must be what John was going through mentally. Every single day. Which gave me the strength to keep pushing. Anyways, my job was to make sure he succeeded, no matter what it took. I truly believed fasting would either shrink his cancer outright or at minimum put a big dent in his cancer's growth. I was desperate to try anything. It was imperative to make this impossible starve a reality. January 16th, 2023. The fast began. Not in a hotel this time. We did this at home. We had all the supplements and teas ready for him. I let him drink as many herbal teas as he wanted since it didn't break autophagy. But of course, there was no foods, only drinks such as water, tea, and supplements. The first 3 days were familiar territory. Hunger, irritability. But John had done this before. I knew it would pass. Day 4, day 5, day 6. The transition into ketosis, energy stabilizing, becoming manageable. Day 7. The point where we'd broken the last fast. John kept going, drinking many teas along the way. Days 8 through 14 were uncharted territory. This was longer than John had ever gone without food, longer than most people, PWS or not, ever go voluntarily. His body was running purely on stored fat now, converting it to ketones, fueling his brain and organs with a completely different energy source than glucose. The point was to change John's body from using glucose to ketones so the cancer cells would starve. They were inefficient at burning ketones for fuel. His glucose levels dropped low, stayed low, stabilized. His ketone levels peaked, high, consistent. Cancer cells were starving. I monitored him obsessively. How he looked, how he moved, how he sounded, looking for any sign that we needed to stop, any indication that his body was breaking down. But John was fine. Tired, yes. Weaker than normal, absolutely, but fine. His eyes were clear. His mind seemed fine. His determination was unshakable. I asked him if he could keep going, or if he wanted to stop. I can keep going. It's okay. I can get more games, right? Of course, bro, but don't do it if you're feeling sick. We can get those games later. I'm fine. I can do it. And so, we continued. Days 15 through 21. The final week. This is where most people, even experienced fasters, start to struggle mentally. Not from hunger anymore, from monotony, from the sheer psychological weight of going this long without food. But John kept going. Every day I'd ask, "How are you feeling? Do you want to stop?" Every day, "I'm okay. I can keep going." February 5th, 2023. 21 days, 3 weeks, no food. A man with Prader-Willi Syndrome, a condition defined by uncontrollable, relentless, never-ending hunger, had voluntarily fasted for 21 days. We broke the fast. But this wasn't easy. He said he was very hungry and wanted to eat. Fast. So I used the same trick again. "Do you want some extra oxtail soup before breakfast or nah?" "Yes, I want it." I gave him oxtail soup first, then gradually introduced soft-boiled foods. "Brother, I'm hungry. Hurry up and give me normal keto food." He was having a big temper tantrum, yelling and shouting. I couldn't buy much time, only an hour or two at most. So I gave him his regular keto food that included some hard vegetables like celery, which was one of his favorites, but he didn't seem to have too many problems. Thank God. His body accepted food again without issue. No refeeding syndrome, no major complications, just success. I thought, this is it. We've done something incredible. John needs rest now. And then we replicated the same success with another prolonged fast. March 16th, 2023. 5 weeks after breaking the 21-day fast. John started again. This time, we were aiming for something truly extraordinary. 30 days. A full month without food. This time it was John that said he would do 30. I said 21 days is enough. I was scared in case of health risks. For someone with PWS, this wasn't just breaking records. This was rewriting what we thought was physiologically possible. This time it was John that offered to do a longer fast. I kept the same promise of buying games every week he completed. The first week was easier this time. John's body remembered ketosis. He was already on a ketogenic diet, so he adapted faster. The transition was smoother. Week 2, week 3. John was in deep ketosis now. His body had become a fat-burning machine. Ketone levels stayed high and stable. Glucose stayed low. Energy remained consistent. No cheating, no sneaking food, no breaking the fast, just pure, unshakable will. Day 21 came and went, the point where we'd stopped last time. John kept going. I was monitoring everything even more closely now, because we were in truly uncharted territory. PWS patients don't fast for a month. Hell, most healthy people don't fast for a month. But John's numbers kept looking good. His energy held. He looked tired but fine. Day 22, 23, 24, 25. Day 26. April 11th, 2023. That's when it ended. Not because John wanted to stop, not because his body gave out, but because of food waste. I got sloppy. I should have hidden the food waste properly or taken it out of the home. But I was completely exhausted. I wasn't thinking straight. My heart sank. He went through and ate half of the food wastes, full of germs. John did the extraordinary of 26 days fast. He looked like he could do a few days more, but the damage had been done. He broke the autophagy by eating. I was angry. I won't lie. Even though this was completely my fault, but him eating rotting foods just made me lose it. I shouted at him. We argued. Emotions ran high on both sides. John was angry. I was disappointed, angry, and exhausted. I walked out for a few minutes, but then I stopped, and I thought about what John had accomplished. 26 days, 3 weeks and 5 days, without food, a man with a genetic condition that makes fasting physiologically impossible, had just fasted for 26 days. I calmed down, because what John had done, what he'd accomplished twice now, was beyond anything medical science said was possible. 21 days, then 26 days, 57 total days of fasting just from these 2 fasts alone, in less than 3 months. PWS is defined by unrelenting hunger, by complete inability to regulate food intake. Yet John had suppressed that hunger longer than most healthy men could endure. He didn't just starve, he chose to starve cancer. And that choice, repeated over and over for 57 days, that was the real miracle. When I came back home, I saw him bin all the supplements I packed out of anger. I was still mad, but at the end of the day, it was my fault. It's not John's fault. I was amazed he even completed a 26-day water fast. He is proof that the human will, if properly supported, properly guided, properly loved, can override biology itself. John had done what every expert said couldn't be done. Not once, not twice, multiple times, each time going longer, pushing further, proving that impossible is just a word people use when they haven't seen it done yet. Looking back, it was my support system that failed him. It was my duty to make sure his environment was perfect. It was completely my fault. I blame this solely on myself. I'm sure John had 30 days in the bag if I was more careful. I desperately wanted my brother to live. I cried almost every day for nearly 2 years at night since he was diagnosed with cancer. When he wasn't looking, of course. I needed to be seen as strong so he could rely on me, but deep down, I was torn. Just being a witness of what he was going through was very tough to handle. I thought it was so unfair how John, with PWS, would get gastric cancer, and at the worst possible location. The thought of seeing my brother suffer from hunger and knowing there was nothing I could do to alleviate it had always made me choke up. I think all caregivers of PWS feel the same way. PWS was so difficult to deal with, and now we get cancer as a cherry on top. But then again, I believe there are no coincidences in life. So, was this destiny? Did we have to walk this path? I tried to keep my mind clear of negative thoughts while I was looking after him, but it wasn't easy. His tantrums got worse as time progressed. Though, I don't blame him. He's lived an incredibly painful journey. He is an incredibly brave soul. Chapter 9. The Miracles. Not one miracle, not two. Multiple, undeniable, perfectly timed, things that should not have happened, but did. Miracle number 1. Knowledge arrived as if God was guiding us. I didn't search for metabolic therapy. It found me. Materials related to alternative treatments to cancer is not easy to find. I suspect there is an algorithm that won't push these materials unless you knew the exact key words. And yet, they were handed to me very early on. Dr. Berg's interviews with stage 3 and 4 cancer survivors. Then Dr. Thomas Seyfried's metabolic approach to cancer. Then about Dr. Jason Fung's materials on fasting. Were all given to me on day 1 of research after the initial diagnosis. Anyone that does a deep dive on cancer knows it's a daunting task with so much information to go through. It's confusing because one paper will say one thing and another will contradict it. Then there are so many various protocols it becomes overwhelming, and yet, I had a very strong foundation to start from. I may sound delusional to some, but I was convinced. I believed that everything would be okay, that we were protected and guided by God, and God will make a path for us. Miracle number 2. The only oncologist that specialized in ketogenic diet in Korea was 10 minutes away. Of all cities, of all districts, of all distances in an entire country, there was one oncologist specializing on ketogenic diet that I could find, and they were just a 10-minute drive away. We didn't search the world for him. We found him already waiting. Coincidence? I don't think so. He was there exactly when we needed him. Maybe we were guided by God long before cancer came to be. He was very understanding of our situation and advised me on ketogenic diets. We did regular checkup on my brother's blood work to see if there was anything wrong. He was very knowledgeable and warm. But as a medical professional, he advised us to do the operation. It's just, we didn't have much of a choice. And John was vehemently against the operation, and I will always respect his decision. And to all that think he's not intelligent enough. No, he's not stupid enough to be unable to make the most important decision of his life. He spoke 2 languages. His conversational and understanding skills were fine. He knew exactly what would happen if his stomach was removed. He didn't want any form of limitations when it came to eating. Eating was the only thing on his mind 24/7, and to restrict it in forms of portion sizes, eating speed, or removing certain foods altogether. It was something he couldn't agree to. I loved him too much to go against his decision. It was his free will. Miracle number 3. The money miracle. Our family had some land as an investment, and for over 2 decades it couldn't be sold. My father tried to sell many times, but the only offers we got were either low balls or scams. But then, few months after the cancer diagnosis, sudden buyer, fair price, money arrived. Enough to fund a lot of the alternative therapies such as hyperbaric oxygen, vitamin C, hyperthermic therapy, all the various procedures such as blood tests, CTS, endoscopies, other various protocols, supplements, clinics, ketogenic food, fasting support, trips overseas, and more. Again, was this just some lucky coincidence? Miracle number 4, and then the miracle that defines this story. But the biggest miracle was John, a man born with a hunger that never stops, yet he stopped it. By will and determination, 7 days fasting, 21 days fasting, 26 days fasting. He fasted, not once, not twice, multiple times. Doctors couldn't believe it. Papers don't record it. Science has no framework for it. But I saw it with my very own eyes, and I wasn't just watching. I walked beside him. 2 brothers trying desperately to starve out the cancer together 1 day at a time. No medical journal can explain what he did. Somehow, he was given the strength to overcome what should have been a physiologically and genetically impossible task. He beat the one enemy no one thought could be beaten. To me, that's a miracle. All these strange but perfect coincidences made me realize that anything is possible. While my brother had many ups and downs internally, I kept believing that everything would be fine for John, that God is leading us down the best possible path. Chapter 10. Thailand. A breath of sunlight. We were both exhausted, not just physically, not just from the fasting, the supplements, the constant monitoring, emotionally, spiritually, completely. The fight against cancer is a marathon that feels like a sprint, every day, for months. I was always vigilant, always researching, always wondering, is this working? Is the tumor growing? Are we doing enough? We needed a reset, not a vacation. John's condition didn't allow for real vacations, but a change, a breath, a moment to exhale. Thailand. They were incredibly polite and friendly. Thai oncologists were more open to alternative approaches, more willing to discuss metabolic therapy, off-label medications, integrative treatments. In Korea, mentioning ketogenic diet to an oncologist usually got you lectured. In Thailand, they listened. As we arrived in Bangkok, the heat hit us the moment we stepped outside the airport. Thick, humid, tropical heat. But it didn't feel oppressive. It felt alive. The first thing I noticed, People smiled. There's something about Thai culture, the genuine kindness, the unhurried pace, that immediately made everything feel lighter. John felt it too. We rented a condo nearby major hospitals in Bangkok. High-rise building, rooftop pool, fully equipped kitchen. But here's the thing. I barely used the kitchen to cook. Because Thailand, especially Bangkok, had something Korea didn't. Keto-friendly delivery services. Back in Korea, keeping John on ketogenic diet meant I cooked everything. Measuring portions, making sure vegetables were right. Proteins were grass-fed using butter or coconut oil for cooking, the usual for a ketogenic diet. There was a very limited selection of keto gimbap for order. It's basically eggs, beef, and some vegetables wrapped in seaweed paper. But in Thailand, I just had to press a few buttons on an app, and I'd have access to entire restaurants dedicated to ketogenic meals delivered straight to our condo. There were many variations to choose from. The usual meat and vegetable combo, konjac noodles, almond flour-baked pizzas, chicken curry with cauliflower rice, and the list goes on. All delivered, all portioned, all calculated. I could order ketogenic meals and never cook once. The food wasn't just functional, it was delicious. Thai chefs, no flavor. Even restricted to keto ingredients, they made everything taste incredible. John would eat and actually enjoy it, not just tolerate it. "This is really good," he'd say, smiling. Simple words. But coming from someone whose relationship with food was complicated by cancer, whose meals had been restricted. Those words meant everything. He loved it in Thailand with all the various ketogenic foods he could try. But I still brought the lox from Korea. I locked the fridge so I could store my food. The system we'd relied on for years. But something was different in Thailand. Maybe it was the food quality. Maybe it was the variety. Maybe it was just the change of environment. John complied without too much fighting. He saw the locks, understood why they were there, and didn't try to break them. Maybe because he wasn't feeling deprived. He was eating delicious meals. Meals I could never cook at home with my limited skills. The locks became routine instead of punishment. The rooftop pool became John's sanctuary. Every building in Bangkok seems to have one. Infinity edge, city views stretching for miles, open sky above. John would float there for hours. He would swim many laps and have a relaxing exercise. The water was always warm. It made it so easy to jump in. For someone who'd spent months fighting his own body, fighting cancer, fighting hunger. The pool was freedom. I'd watch him from the deck chairs, floating on his back, eyes closed, completely still. He looked peaceful. Not struggling, not stressed, just peace. Those moments made every difficult decision, every exhausting day, every sacrifice worth it. Then there were arcade machines at a nearby shopping mall. Dozens of games, racing simulators, shooting games, dance machines. John loved the dance machines. He would stay at the arcade for 1, maybe 2 hours. John loved to dance. He'd sweat a lot, then switch to a different game, then back to dancing. He was having a lot of fun. The arcade became our weekly routine. Every few days, couple hours, fun exercise. Those hours were precious. They reminded me that John wasn't just my brother with PWS and cancer. He was John, who liked to live and smile. The medical care in Thailand was a revelation. We found an oncologist, one of the best I've met. She spoke perfect English and actually listened. I explained our metabolic approach we were trying due to his circumstances, the fasting, the ketogenic diet. She didn't dismiss it. She knew of them already. Let's monitor closely and see how he responds. We can try adding some supplements to help him digest in the meantime. More importantly, she understood off-label medications. In Korea, getting anything outside standard protocols was nearly impossible unless you found an understanding oncologist. In Thailand, more flexible. Maybe I was lucky, but she was one of the first I looked up. She helped me source medications that supported our approach, things that wouldn't be available in Korea but showed promise in research. Mebendazole, anti-parasitic drug that's shown anti-cancer properties by blocking certain pathways. Artemisinin, anti-malaria drug found to target cancerous cells. Nothing radical. Nothing dangerous. Just tools that conventional oncology in Korea wouldn't consider. She got it. She helped. She supported what we were doing. Flexibility was everything. But beyond the medical benefits, Thailand gave us something harder to quantify: joy. However, the tumor was still there. The fight wasn't over. But John's spirit, which had been ground down by months of fasting and restrictions, started recovering, and my spirit, exhausted from constant caregiving and research and worry, started recovering too. Thailand didn't cure the cancer. We experienced our fair share of troubles, but it gave us something almost as important: hope, energy, and renewed determination. When we returned to Korea, we were rested, recharged, and ready. The battle would continue. More smaller fasts, more protocols, more monitoring. But now we had reserves to draw from. Thailand had given us a gift: the strength to keep going. Looking back, those trips were some of the best of John's final years. Not because everything was perfect, but because he got to just live, floating in rooftop pools, eating delicious food without fighting over every bite, being happy. If you're fighting a long battle, any battle, remember this: you need moments of light, moments where the fight pauses, where you remember what you're fighting for. Thailand was our light, and it kept us going when the darkness returned. Chapter 11. The Plateau, 2024. Just fighting. Every day. With no end in sight. The cancer kept growing. The results were disappointing. Even with all the fasting we did, the cancer kept growing little by little. Maybe fasting and ketogenic diet had slowed the progression, but we didn't see any shrinkage. We did more fasting, a 3-day sardine challenge, which is Dr. Boz's method to boost ketones, then did a 14-day fast straight after to keep the high ketones during the fasting stage. And with it, we were able to control diabetes, but it didn't seem to shrink the tumors. I must add, since the very start of fasting, John would be very stubborn and wouldn't brush his teeth. I don't need to brush my teeth because I didn't eat anything. Every time I tried to persuade him, it would end up with yelling and screaming. I don't want to stay here anymore. Or, give me food now. So, I couldn't push him too much during his fast because I wanted him to reach high ketone levels. But the problem was he kept the same behavior outside of fasting too. Sometimes he wouldn't bother brushing his teeth for days. And this had been going on for over a year now. Finally, I had enough and I slapped the back of his head and yelled at him. Hey, if you don't brush your teeth, then it will keep feeding your cancer. You'll die if you don't brush your teeth morning and night. He started screaming, yelling, crying, and thrashed about. I had to get him in a chokehold to calm him down. But he kept screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs, telling me he hated me and didn't want to stay here anymore. I know I probably went a bit overboard, but this has been going on for well over a year. Some days he would brush his teeth once a day in the morning. Some days he would skip entirely for a few days. He didn't show this behavior when he was in a more structured environment, like at a hospital, when he was admitted for a few weeks. But at home, his tendencies got worse over time, and I was having difficulty controlling my emotions. It felt like all of this was for nothing, simply because he wouldn't bother brushing his teeth. So I snapped and slapped the back of his head, though not at full strength, but enough to make him angry. And to be accurate, I only choked him lightly, but mostly for just placing him in a hold so he would stop throwing things around the room. It took maybe 20 to 30 minutes of him constantly yelling and shouting before he calmed down. I explained to him that I only did that because I wanted him to live longer. Later that night, I saw him sway around and then he collapsed on the floor. I didn't know what was happening. I asked him if he needs an ambulance. He looked pale, sweat down his forehead, and said, yes. Ambulance came and we were taken to a local hospital before getting transferred to C hospital, where his records were. We moved from S hospital. He needed blood transfusions due to anemia. Perhaps him screaming at the top of his lungs used a lot of muscles around his chest and stomach, which lead him to bleed out internally due to the stomach cancer. The move from S hospital to C hospital happened because we refused surgery, and they didn't want to guide us if we didn't follow their advice. The local hospital, C Hospital, was still a top-tier hospital in Korea, so we were fine with the transition. However, after the transfusions, draining some blood pooled in his stomach and some checkups, they too were concerned and really pushed us to do the surgery. I was told that I was cowardly for listening to John's wishes, that he was not capable of making such decisions because he is handicapped, and that he could go ahead with the surgery without John's permission because he was disabled, as long as me and the parents agreed. But, having talked to John for a long time about the surgery, he said he definitely didn't want it. We had so many conversations about it. Every time I asked, he would always say, "No, I don't want it. Stop asking me about it." And of course, I knew the risks of the surgery for the aftermath. But the doctor wasn't hearing any of it. He said it's his destiny if he dies a painful death. But what I should do as responsible guardians is to save his life with the surgery, since this may be the last chance he could have it. He threatened to kick him out as soon as he got better if we didn't listen. But now the cancer had grown to stage 3, making his survival rate much lower even with the surgery. All he said was true from his perspective, and I wasn't mad at him. But he didn't know my brother. I called my parents to ask for their opinion. Mother said just do the surgery, but she changed her mind when she was told it had grown to stage 3. Father said he doesn't know enough to make the right decision and said he'll agree with what I feel is right. My feeling was to keep my brother's wishes. I desperately wanted to see him live longer, but not at the expense of going against his wishes. The situation kept getting worse. Sometimes it felt like there was nothing I could do but cry. It was just a really crappy situation to live through with no right or wrong answers. Radiation therapy. We were referred to another doctor for radiation treatment at C Hospital. The doctor explained, radiation can shrink the tumor, it can give him more time. 5 days a week, for over a month, around 30 sessions in total. Early morning appointments, 40 minutes from our new place. Every single morning. We'd moved away from our previous apartment, needed a change, needed to reset again. But that meant the hospital was farther. And the appointments? Early. 8 a.m. Here's why early mattered. Radiation for gastric cancer requires an empty stomach. No food for hours before treatment. For a normal person, annoying. For someone with PWS, torture. The hospital staff understood this. They knew about John's condition. They knew that asking him to fast until afternoon would be impossible. Even with all the fasts John did, he was incredibly cranky and threw a fit when his meals weren't given on time. It was typical PWS behavior. He didn't want his breakfast late. So they made room for him first thing in the morning, 8 a.m. in and out. Before the hunger became unbearable, small mercy, huge impact. Every morning the same routine, wake up, get dressed, drive 40 minutes, arrive at the hospital, check in, wait. John would lie on the radiation table, stay perfectly still, let the machine do its work. 10 minutes of treatment, 40 minutes of driving each way, 5 days a week, for over 6 weeks. John complied, and we managed to do all these sessions on time, every morning, even when he was tired, even when he was hungry, even when he didn't want to. He showed up, because he understood, in his own way, that this was part of the fight, that these early morning drives and radiation sessions were keeping him alive. He trusted the process. We finished radiation sessions without too much troubles. We did another CT scan, held our breath waiting for results. The tumor had shrunk, not disappeared, not gone, but measurably smaller. The oncologist was pleased. The radiation worked well. He needs a break from treatment now. Let his body recover. A break. This was the first time we actually saw the tumor shrink. And we were told it will continue to shrink over the next few months. John's mother had been asking to see him. She lived overseas, hadn't seen John in months. This seemed like perfect timing. Let John rest, see mother. Take a few weeks away from the constant medical battle. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. The problem started immediately. No locks on the fridge. At my place, we had systems, locks, cameras, structure. At his mother's place, nothing. She didn't have the same setup, and even if I took the locks from Korea, he would have just yelled and demanded they be removed. He was not the same John when we were in Thailand. He knew Mother didn't use locks in the house. John's PWS doesn't take breaks just because he's visiting family. After a few days, he got into the kitchen early in the morning and ate frozen food, straight from the freezer. His brain didn't care that it was frozen, didn't care that it would make him sick. His brain only knew food, eat, now. When confronted, John yelled, not the rational John who showed up for radiation every morning. PWS John, cornered, defensive, overwhelmed. I didn't eat that much. Why are you always watching me? Stop it! The tantrums were back, amplified. We tried removing food from the fridge, binned lots of foods, keeping only minimal items accessible. John screamed, I don't want to stay here anymore. This isn't fair. I want to go back to Korea. Not a teenager throwing a fit. A grown man whose brain was in genuine panic mode. Mother was overwhelmed. She loved John, wanted to help, but she wasn't equipped for this. She didn't have the patience to handle his outbursts. She was just upset at the whole situation. The break became more stressful than treatment. Now, with him eating uncontrollably early in the morning, sneaking into the fridge and eating whatever he could jeopardized all the hard work we did with the radiation. He was consuming foods that was forbidden at my place, like ketchup, sugary sauces, snacks, or foods with high carbohydrates. It was chaos. Every day brought new incidents, new arguments, new stress. His glucose levels spiked again. All the control we'd fought for, gone. The PWS tantrums that had been manageable in our structured environment were completely unmanageable without it. So we just kind of gave in. His mother was suffering. John was suffering. We needed our structure back. When John returned, he was different. The few weeks without structure had undone months of careful habit building. He was more argumentative, more impulsive, more controlled by his PWS. We had to rebuild again. This is what 2024 felt like. Constant rebuilding. We'd make progress. Then something would disrupt it. Then we'd rebuild. Progress, disruption, rebuild, over and over and over. The plateau wasn't a flat line. It was a saw blade, up and down. Victories and setbacks. Days where John was a warrior. Days where hunger hijacked everything. Both were real. Both were exhausting. But we were still fighting. The radiation had worked. The tumor had shrunk. John had shown up. Every morning, every session, without fail. We weren't winning yet, but we hadn't lost. And in a fight this long, staying in the fight is winning. 2024 taught me something crucial. Progress isn't linear. You don't fight cancer and get steadily better until you're cured. You fight, you plateau, you backslide, you rebuild, you fight again, and you keep fighting. Not because victory is guaranteed, but because giving up isn't an option. John was still here, still fighting. That was enough. For now, that had to be enough. Chapter 12. The Decline. Late 2024, early 2025. The downturn we feared came to be. After we returned from our mother's place, we scheduled another CT scan. Routine monitoring, standard protocol, part of the ongoing fight. I expected the usual, some growth, some shrinkage, the back and forth we'd been managing for months. I wasn't prepared for what we saw. The cancer had metastasized, no longer confined to the stomach. Now in the liver, possibly the lungs. The word metastasis hits different than tumor. Tumor sounds contained, localized, fightable. Metastasis sounds like spreading, escaping, losing. I sat in the oncologist's office, shocked at the outcome. It was shrinking before. How did it progress to stage 4 so quickly? This was what we'd been trying to prevent for 2 years. All the fasting, all the supplements, all the protocols, all the early morning radiation appointments. And the cancer had spread anyway. The oncologist's voice was gentle but firm. We should start chemotherapy. Now. I looked at John. He sat quietly, not fully understanding other than cancer growing bigger. Reading the doctor's tone, I could feel he was sad and disappointed, but I assured him, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." The survivors saw good results when they mixed chemo with some protocols. We will see good results too. Chemotherapy started in November 2024. The set of chemotherapy showed good results. After around 3 months of chemotherapy, his cancer shrunk. The stomach tumor, the original site, from 4.6 centimeters, 1.8 inch, to 3.5 centimeters, 1.37 inch. The liver metastasis responded. Shrunk. For a moment we had hope again. But now his liver wasn't good, so we discontinued other protocols for 2 weeks and lowered his chemo dose. And his liver improved. His red blood cell count, which is an important factor for measuring anemia, was getting a bit worse, so I gave him some minced meats to improve those numbers. After 2 months, we did another CT scan and saw that the metastasized liver cancer had shrunk from 2.4 centimeters, 0.94 inches, to 0.6 centimeters, 0.23 inches. Lungs were just a small infection, not cancer, but his stomach cancer remained largely the same at 3.3 centimeters, 1.3 inches. The chemo sessions went for 6 months in total, once every 2 weeks, and we were advised to take a 1.5-month break before the next session. Then the swallowing issues started. At first, just minor difficulty. Foods taking longer to go down, needing more time to swallow. We didn't think much of it, but it got worse. The tumor was growing near the entrance to his stomach, the same location that made surgery so dangerous. Now it was narrowing his esophagus. Meals became ordeals. What used to take 20 minutes now took an hour, sometimes 2. Every bite had to be small, chewed thoroughly, swallowed carefully, and even then, sometimes it wouldn't go down. He'd choke, cough, spit food back up. Watching John struggle to swallow was harder than watching him fast. Fasting was a choice, a strategy, something he could control. This was his body failing him. The vomiting became more frequent, not just from chemo, from the obstruction. Food would get stuck. His body would reject it. He would often tell me not to talk to him because he had food stuck in his throat. Every episode was traumatic. His strength fell. The man who'd completed 26-day fasts, who'd shown willpower that defied medical understanding, was getting weaker. Fasting wasn't possible anymore. The tool that had worked so well for 2 years was no longer an option. John needed calories, needed nutrition, needed strength. We couldn't afford to fast anymore. I tried to make eating easier, but he was being stubborn and wanted what he normally ate. Luckily, I cut out hard to chew foods long time ago and told him that it was sold out. But whenever I tried to make him something soft, like soups or porridges, he'd decline, saying he didn't like it. He wasn't playing ball. We were losing the battle on multiple fronts. Swallowing got worse as days passed. He said he had food stuck in his throat. But then he kept pushing more food down his throat. I understand it's difficult to control hunger urges with PWS, but to be shoving food down his throat when it was already full proved aftercare would have been impossible if he had the surgery. I told him to stop eating and wait until the food went down. He threw a tantrum saying he was fine and stopped talking to me. I couldn't stop him from eating. The moment I try, he'd get physical and end up hurting himself. I was angry at John and angry and upset at this whole situation. But this was John. Even with all the impossible fasts he did, at some point he would break down and lose his control over his PWS. A little over a month later, we did an endoscopy, but the cancer had grown so big that the camera couldn't fit into his stomach. Now we were given 2 options. 1, if there was still enough space between his esophagus and the stomach, then they could insert a stent inside, widen the hole, allowing him to eat normally again. 2, put a hole in his stomach, and John would have to start eating through a stomach feeding tube. Just painful decisions one after another. It felt like I was getting kicked in the groin every time we went in for a meeting. Obviously, option 2 was out of bounds. One angry tantrum and he'd rip out the gastric tube out his body, then die a painful death. He already tried to pull out his chemo port before. It's an implantable port made with a flexible catheter that is placed under the skin on his upper chest and threads into a large vein near the heart. It is used so chemotherapy, blood transfusions, medications, or drawing blood can be done without repeated needle sticks. Me and John both needed the stent to work, just anything but option 2. John had no interest in option 2. It meant he couldn't eat through his mouth anymore. He said he would rather die than do the G-tube. We set a date for the stent surgery. They booked us just 9 days away. We did another 3-day fast in between the surgery, even though his weight was on the light side. He and I desperately wanted to slow down the progression of cancer long enough for the surgery. The stent surgery. Luckily, the stent operation was successful, but John was incredibly angry. So angry that it became almost impossible to control. He thought that he would be given anesthesia and not feel any pain, but for this type of operation it wasn't allowed, just enough to put him into sleep briefly. The damage had been done. He woke up screaming and yelling at the top of his lungs, kicking and flaying, blood going everywhere. He was screaming so much that there was blood pooled in his mouth, blood coming from the freshly placed stent or his stomach. He was trying to rip out his chemo port again. I was called in to try and calm him down, but he was in such a fit of rage that nothing I said would help. All I could do was hold down his arms while he was kicking and screaming. I had to hold his hands down to stop him from ripping out his chemo port. Then minutes later, a security officer came in and held down his legs to stop his kicking. Nurses came in and we wheeled him up to a patient ward. He was screaming and yelling entire time, blood dripping, everyone at the hospital watching. At the patient ward, they gave him some sedative injections, but it didn't kick in for a while. His screams continued. There were 6 to 8 nurses all trying to hold him down to stop him from moving. He was being incredibly difficult to deal with. Eventually, they found something to tie his hands and feet. He was still screaming, and they had to suck out blood in his mouth. He had so much blood pooled that he was starting to choke on it. Then, after a while, sedation kicked in, and he went to sleep. I was banned from leaving the patient ward in case John had another tantrum again. What was supposed to be a short hospital visit turned out to be a 5-day stay. I was with him the entire time, and luckily he didn't have another tantrum during the remaining days. But now we had another problem. He couldn't sleep on his back anymore. The stomach was kept forced open so he would get serious acid reflux and vomit blood. During the hospital stay, he didn't seem to have much issues, but he was sitting on his hospital bed and playing his PSP most of the time. But over time, it got worse and worse. I tried giving him many different anti-reflux pillows, but none of them worked. He had to sleep upright to not get those symptoms. After the stent operation, he would never sleep normally again. But John said he still preferred that over the G-tube. It was incredibly sad to see him not get much sleep. Not that he slept much anyway, but he didn't have a choice now. I just prayed that his cancer would shrink and so the stent could be removed. Chapter 13. The Last Sunrise. Mid-2025 to late 2025. After the stent operation, some time had passed and he was no longer able to stay under my care anymore. He was having pains on his lower stomach. CT showed metastasis onto his lower spine, which made it worse because he was always staying up right at 90-degree angle as he couldn't lie down. Now he was staying at a convalescent care facility, a hospital specializing in recovery. He couldn't walk to the toilet anymore, so they had the staff there to clean out his diapers. The second round of chemo, which were much stronger than the first, was supposed to be done short time after his stent surgery. However, John had such a bad time with the stent surgery that he refused to get the chemo until a month and a half later. This time, chemo was so harsh that he could only tolerate 2 rounds before his body gave in. His hair fell out drastically. He had to get a urethra. He got sepsis. It was complete chaos for him. He was given strong painkillers to numb the pain. Luckily, every time I asked if he was experiencing any pain, he said no. The only time I saw him in pain was when they had to do an X-ray, where they had to put his body in a flat position. He vomited, and I saw him in agonizing pain. There was another procedure of inserting a small tube down his throat which would make him vomit again. I asked if those procedures could be skipped, but John was detected with bacterium that had resistance to antibiotics, so they had to do various tests. I felt powerless, but also understood that he couldn't infect other patients, so routine checkup was a must. It was a legal requirement they had to follow. I visited him nearly every day to see how he was and to get him anything he wanted. I bought him a PS Portal to play his PS5 away from home. But we had Wi-Fi issues when he moved to the ICU after they found antibiotic-resistant bacteria. A Steam Deck installed with offline games and various other gaming devices, and Netflix to try and distract him from the pain. I had to cut Netflix before because he kept watching shows late into the night and wrecked his sleeping cycle. His favorite was Avatar, The Last Airbender. He told me he cried while watching it. He was at the convalescent care facility for little over 2 months. I visited him nearly every day. Even then we had little fits. Well, just one. I got angry at him when I saw him using a dirty fan. After I cleaned it, I asked him, "Why don't you clean it? It's so dusty." He said, "How could I? I can't even move properly." I was just so upset that no one would clean it for him other than myself. I was just under so much stress over the years with everything happening to us. It was all overwhelming, the worst possible situation. It seemed so unfair. All of it. I apologized the next time I saw him and told him I was just upset at the whole situation, that it wasn't his fault. But deep inside, I always thought that he was going to get better and get out of there. But as time passed, his breathing began to slow. Then, his hunger ended. His suffering ended. He was finally able to sleep on his back again. He went back home to God. Chapter 14. What went wrong? Maybe it was destiny. The coincidence of John getting stomach cancer that required a full gastrectomy? I always thought, why gastric cancer for John? Why stomach cancer for a PWS? Why was it located at the top of the stomach? Why did he need his entire stomach removed? Him being stubborn didn't help. He wasn't going to sleep on time. He probably averaged 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, then small naps in the afternoon. He didn't bother brushing his teeth properly until that major incident happened. I told him he went to the ICU because he didn't brush his teeth properly. He believed me and started to brush his teeth morning and night afterwards. For a few months anyway. I really did try hard to get him to brush his teeth before the incident, but he just wouldn't listen. He just yelled, "You're not a doctor. You don't know anything." I got so frustrated that when I took John to an oncologist, I asked him directly, what would happen if John didn't brush his teeth every day? "Can you please explain this to John?" "Well, John, you have stomach cancer, so every time you swallow, those germs in your mouth will go straight to your cancer, directly feeding it. You must brush more than the normal person, minimum 3 times a day." John didn't say anything in the room, but in the car he said, "You made him say it. You planned it with him." I told him, "Wait, what? No, bro, how could I? I don't know his phone number." Maybe in his life review he will see that I really didn't, and smile. There were some very promising protocols, but he refused to try or commit because it required time and effort. He just wanted to sit and play games or watch K-drama shows. I am still absolutely grateful that there were other alternative methods to try. It gave us so much hope when everything seemed so bleak. The stories told by the survivors and lectures from giants like Dr. Seyfried were the inspiration we needed to keep trying. Well, to the best ability that we could. I know we couldn't implement them properly. I have no faults with the protocols. Maybe John got tired of trying this and that. I didn't take into account how truly difficult everything was for him. Except brushing his teeth, like, come on, bro, it's barely 3 minutes. He must have been so frustrated with constant tests like, we did so many, including endoscopy, CT, X-rays, and so many blood tests. Good results mixed with bad ones. How he had no freedom to eat what he wanted, though he was very compliant with ketogenic diet when he was under my care. Me and our parents spent heavily into John's treatments, well in the six-figure range, USD. It would have been a much cheaper option to go with the surgery because he was insured for standard procedure, but there was no insurance for trying other treatment methods such as hyperbaric oxygen, hyperthermic treatments, high-dose vitamin C IVs, etc. Our lovely relatives all helped here and there with visits and donations too. I literally did everything I could for him. I desperately wanted him to live longer. He would tell me, "You have to eat, brother. I am fine. Go eat. It will make me happy to see you eat a hamburger. You are too skinny." Childish, I know. But to him, he was fighting his urge of PWS because he wanted to see me gain weight. He put me over himself. I had a lot of frustrating moments and many arguments with John. Maybe I could have been a bit more patient. But sometimes he's literally Eric Cartman in the flesh. He will get to you at some point, no doubt. Even though he couldn't beat it, his journey was so unbelievable that I just had to get this sorted into structured format for others to witness. It was his sheer will and determination that allowed him to achieve the unthinkable, the impossible starve. Chapter 15. His legacy. John did not beat cancer, but he beat hunger, the one enemy no PWS patient in history was expected to conquer. He fasted 7 days, then 21, then 26, and many days after. Not as punishment, not as miracle, but as choice. He proved science wrong. He proved statistics wrong. He proved hunger wrong. Through witnessing his journey from his childhood, I looked at the world very differently. I became spiritual. I refused to believe God would give him PWS and all the suffering attached. God loves us too much for that. I refused to believe that it was just a random statistical chance. No, there must be reasons much deeper than that. What if he chose it himself to come down here and experience life knowing he would have unimaginable hardship? If true, imagine the balls required to make that decision. Just how brave is your soul, John? I'm sure your soul is flying high up above the heavens, and I'm so happy for you. But bro, let's not do this again. Seriously. An unexpected gift from John. There was a time when I was severely underweight, and I pretended to be sick and collapsed on the floor. To be honest, I was incredibly exhausted, and I was feeling a bit dizzy, but not to the point of collapse. But because he was being so stubborn, I thought I'd play an act. I'll collapse on the floor, tell him to call Dad and stay with him for a few days while I got better. I thought to myself, surely he'd feel bad about this and be more cooperative. So I collapsed on the floor and said in a faint voice, "Hey John, can you call Dad and tell him to call the ambulance? I think I have to go to hospital. I'm not feeling so well. Just stay with Dad until I get better, okay?" As he looked at me, his face went bright red and he yelled and cried at the same time. It was a cry I had never seen. It was a battle cry of complete and utter sadness, a feeling that he had just lost something more important than himself. I could feel his world collapse around him. There was zero filter on how he let his emotions out. Tears were streaming down his face nonstop. It felt like the whole room was heating and vibrating, as if God was in the room witnessing his pain. This cry was 100% genuine. PWS patients have a very childlike mind. They can't fake a cry like that. He was so overwhelmed with sadness that I was forced to get up and say, "Bro, I think I'm okay now. You can stop crying." But he couldn't stop crying. I couldn't help but tear up myself because of how genuine it was. I felt incredibly bad and said to myself, "Wow, I better not bullshit like that again." And at the same time felt like I was given the most precious gift, one no amount of money could ever buy. I don't think I will ever witness a cry like that again. He was an incredible teacher to me, and he taught me love, patience, compassion, suffering, forgiveness, and many others. I will carry these with me. Thank you, John, for the incredible lessons. I consider myself very lucky. 1 in 10,000 to 30,000 individuals get PWS, and you happen to be my brother? What an honor. Throughout this journey, I found out the true strength of love. I learned that there were no limitations when it came to helping someone you love, even if it meant starving with them, even if it meant no freedom, even if it meant losing sleep, even if you had to put up with their nonsense at times. All of it was possible because love carried me through the hard times. I hope this story inspires someone out there. I am sure there are many similar stories like this. And to those that may not have someone like me to support you, hey, I'm in your camp. John would have never had done all of this for me. Literally. But know that God is always with you. Miracles are always within your reach. I hope it helps raise awareness of PWS. Governments around the world can do a lot more to actively help families with PWS. They truly need 24/7 supervision, or they will eat themselves to death. Thank you for being a witness of John's journey. I cried countless times while writing this, going through my diary and reliving these memories while somewhat fresh in my mind. The order of events isn't 100% accurate because I needed a natural flow for the book. There is a lot more that's not included in this book. There will be a free audiobook on YouTube. Our official YouTube channel is at The Impossible Starve. Our official website is www.theimpossiblestarve.com. Please check us out if you'd like more information not covered in this book. Thank you for the support. Acknowledgements. To everyone who helped John live longer, live braver, and live with hope. To our family and relatives, for every visit, every donation, every message, and every prayer you sent our way. Even when you could not be physically beside us, your hearts were. Your love carried us through the longest nights and the hardest moments. John felt it. I felt it. Thank you for standing with us. To Dr. Eric Berg, for the hours of videos that became our starting map. Your teachings on ketosis, fasting, insulin, and metabolic therapy gave direction when we were drowning in uncertainty. Your interviews with survivors lit the spark that said, maybe we can try. To Dr. Thomas Seyfried, whose decades of work in metabolic cancer theory opened a new path. Whether or not the world accepts it yet, your research gave us something priceless, time, and a reason to fight. We thank you for your replies. To Dan and Leah Bolton, your story was strength to us. Thank you, Leah, for the many replies with kindness, generosity, and humanity. Thank you for taking your time, and I pray Dan is and always will be healthy. To Joe Tippins, thank you for sharing your success story. I am sure the world will catch up with the science very soon. To Dr. Makis, the success stories you share gave us a lot of hope when conventional treatment wasn't an option for us. Thank you for your bravery. To the doctors at Fuda Hospital in Guangzhou, China, who offered guidance and time, all without asking for anything in return. I was a stranger, yet you treated us with warmth and kindness, taking your time to go over our medical records and advising us for the best solution. I was surprised how advanced Fuda Hospital was. Thank you so much. To the staff at Bangkok Hospital and the nurses and doctors at Paulo Hospital, thank you for every moment of care, patience, and compassion. It helped us get through one of the darkest of times. To the oncologist and staff at ALC in Bangkok, thank you for listening to our situation and advising us with insight. It was refreshing to meet caring doctors that were also so knowledgeable. To the oncologist and staff specializing in ketogenic therapy at our clinic in Korea, you were one of a kind in this country. We are grateful for your kindness and guidance. You were the only oncologist in Korea that was open enough to try other treatments that respected our wishes. I am deeply sorry for any distress John's PWS have caused you and the staff. John deeply regrets his actions. You helped us more than you know. To the teams at S&C Hospital, thank you for caring and trying. I know we weren't the easiest patients to deal with. Thank you for all the help. The doctors and staff at Sea Hospital were exceptional and helped my brother live longer through various treatments. I am sorry for any distress John's misbehavior have caused. To the teams at M Convalescent Care Facility, thank you for looking after John's last 2 months of his life. Thank you for doing what I was not able to do. It was a great facility, and we appreciate all the efforts made to help John's last days as painless as possible. Thank you. To all the teachers and friends at M School for Disabled Children, thank you for looking after him all these years. He had so much fun with his friends and adored his teachers. Thank you for all the kindness shown to John. He loved his time there. To all that shared their story, there are too many to count. Guy, Fred, Jane, Dr. Boz, Kevin Hennings, Al D., and so many others that shared their stories were the glimmers of hope we desperately needed. Thank you for showing what is possible. To the enlightened, thank you to all NDE and OBE experiencers that shared their stories. It gave me a sense of peace long before my brother passed away, though it's still difficult to process the emotions even with the knowing. To all the console and game developers, thank you for making such entertaining games for John to play. It was his life and blood while he was alive. It was very helpful with distracting him from hunger and pain. He had so much fun and couldn't wait till he played the next day. It made our journey with cancer that much easier. And to everyone not mentioned here that shared their effort and time, directly or indirectly, thank you. John and I appreciate each and every one of you. It helped our journey not feel so bleak. Everyone all around the world, regardless of race, showed kindness in their own way. This story does not exist without you all.